Imagine a man who conquered the world with words. Leo Tolstoy, the genius behind War and Peace and Anna Karenina. He had fame that stretched across continents, wealth that could buy anything, and a legacy carved in stone. Yet, beneath this glittering surface, he was drowning in despair. Why would someone with everything feel so hollow? What dark shadow crept into his mind, whispering that death would erase it all? Could the great thinker who devoured philosophy and science find no comfort in their wisdom? Picture him hiding ropes and shunning guns, terrified of his own thoughts. Does that sound like a man at peace? And what about the simple farmers he envied, who owned nothing yet smiled at life? Did they hold a secret he couldn't grasp? Tolstoy's life is a riddle wrapped in questions. Can success really leave you empty? Is meaning a treasure you hunt, or a trap you escape? Dive into his wild journey, where every step challenges what you believe. Leo Tolstoy was one of the most famous writers in the world. He wrote amazing books like War and Peace and Anna Karenina, which made him a legend. He had money, a big house, a loving family, and people admired him everywhere. On the outside, it looked like he had a perfect life. But inside, Tolstoy felt lost and empty. Even with all his success, he couldn't find happiness. He started to wonder what the point of life was. Why did he feel so hollow when he had so much? This feeling grew bigger and bigger until it turned into a deep crisis. Tolstoy called it an existential crisis, a time when he questioned everything about his existence. He had fame, wealth, and talent, but none of it seemed to matter. He felt like something was missing, something he couldn't name. No matter how many awards he won or how much people praised him, the emptiness stayed. It was strange. How could someone with everything feel like they had nothing? Tolstoy's life showed him that money and success don't always bring peace. He began to look deeper, asking big questions. What is life for? Why am I here? Does anything really matter? These thoughts scared him, but they also pushed him to search for answers. He didn't just want to live, he wanted to understand why he was living. His books were loved by millions, but they didn't fill the hole in his heart. Tolstoy's story teaches us that having everything doesn't mean you feel complete. Sometimes the things we chase, like fame or riches, don't give us what we truly need. For Tolstoy, this emptiness was the start of a long journey. He didn't give up. Instead, he kept looking for meaning, even when it was hard. His struggle reminds us that feeling lost can happen to anyone, no matter how successful they seem. Leo Tolstoy reached the top of his life. He wrote famous books, earned lots of money, and had a big name in the world. Everyone knew him, and his work was loved. But even with all this, Tolstoy couldn't stop thinking about death. He became obsessed with the idea that one day he would die. This thought haunted him. He looked at his achievements, his books, his fame, his wealth, and started to feel they were pointless. If death was coming for him, what was the use of anything he had done? No matter how great his stories were, they couldn't stop him from dying. This fear grew so strong that it took away all the joy from his success. He felt like everything he worked for would disappear when his life ended. It was a dark time for him. Tolstoy wondered why he bothered writing or living, if death would erase it all. He saw life as a temporary thing, like a candle that burns out. This made him sad and confused. His big house, his family, his awards, none of it seemed important anymore. The more he thought about death, the more meaningless his life felt. He couldn't escape the question, if we all die, why do we try so hard? This fear wasn't just about losing his life, it was about losing purpose. Tolstoy's mind was trapped in this worry. He didn't know how to feel okay when death was always waiting. It was like a shadow following him every day. But this struggle also made him think deeper. He didn't want to just accept this emptiness. He wanted to find a way to live with the idea of death and still feel alive. His fear pushed him to look for something bigger, something that death couldn't touch. Tolstoy's story shows us how powerful the fear of death can be. It can make even the greatest person feel small. But it also shows that facing this fear can lead to a search for real meaning. Leo Tolstoy was a smart man who loved to think deeply. When he felt lost and empty, he turned to philosophy and science for help. He read books by famous thinkers like Schopenhauer and Kant. These men wrote about life, meaning, and how the world works. Tolstoy hoped their ideas would show him why he was alive and how to feel better. He also looked at science, which explained the stars, the earth, and even the human body. But the more he read, the more disappointed he became. Philosophy gave him big ideas, but no clear answers. Schopenhauer said life was full of pain and had no real point, which made Tolstoy feel worse. Kant talked about reason and rules, but it didn't fill the hole in Tolstoy's heart. Science was even less helpful. It told him how things worked, but not why they mattered. He wanted to know what made life worth living, but these books couldn't tell him. Instead of hope, he found more despair. The smart words and big theories felt empty to him. They were like puzzles with missing pieces. Tolstoy realized that philosophy and science were good at asking questions, but not at solving his problem. He felt trapped. His mind was full of knowledge, but his soul was still lost. He didn't need facts or arguments. He needed something to believe in. This was a hard lesson for him. He had always trusted his brain to find the truth, but now it wasn't enough. The more he searched in books, the more he saw their limits. They couldn't stop his fear of death or his sadness. Tolstoy's struggle shows that knowledge alone can't heal a broken spirit. He learned that answers about life might not come from thinking too hard. This pushed him to look somewhere else, away from ideas and toward real experiences. His journey reminds us that sometimes the biggest questions don't have answers in words or numbers. Leo Tolstoy was a man with everything, fame, money, and a family, but he still felt empty inside. His fear of death and his search for meaning made him so unhappy that he thought about killing himself. This wasn't just a passing thought. It was serious. He was so afraid of his own mind that he hid ropes in his house. He didn't want them around because he worried he might use them to hang himself. He also stopped carrying a gun when he went out, even though he loved hunting. He didn't trust himself with it. The idea of ending his life came to him often during this dark time. Tolstoy couldn't find a reason to keep going. His books were famous, his name was known all over the world, but none of it mattered to him anymore. He felt like life was a heavy weight he couldn't carry. Every day he asked himself, "Why am I here? What's the point if I'm just going to die?" These questions ate at him. He didn't talk much about this with others, but inside, he was fighting a big battle. It was a secret pain, hidden behind his success. Tolstoy wasn't weak. He was strong enough to face these thoughts. But he was lost. The sadness was so deep that death started to look like an escape. He didn't want to die because he hated life. He wanted to stop the confusion and hurt. But something kept him from doing it. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was fear of what came after death. This time showed how broken he felt, even with all his talent and wealth. Tolstoy's struggle teaches us that anyone can feel this low, no matter how great their life looks. It also shows how hard he tried to find light in the darkness. Instead of giving up, he kept searching for a way to live. His story is sad, but it's also brave. He faced the worst thoughts and didn't let them win. Leo Tolstoy was rich and famous, but he wasn't happy. He had a big house, lots of money, and a name everyone knew, yet he felt empty inside. One day, he started watching the people around him, especially the poor workers and farmers. These were men and women who didn't have much. They didn't own big lands or write famous books. They worked hard every day, growing food, building things, and taking care of their families. They didn't know much about philosophy or science, and they didn't have fancy education. But Tolstoy noticed something amazing. They seemed calm and happy. While he was lost in his thoughts, worrying about death and meaning, these simple people just lived. They laughed, sang, and found joy in small things like a good meal or a sunny day. Tolstoy was surprised. How could they be so peaceful when they had so little? He saw that they didn't ask big questions like he did. They didn't need to know the meaning of life, they just enjoyed it. This made him think. Maybe he was looking too hard for something that was already there. The workers didn't have his wealth or fame, but they had something he didn't: contentment. They weren't afraid of death the way he was. They accepted life as it came, day by day. Tolstoy envied them. He realized that all his learning and success didn't bring him the peace these people had. Their lives were tough, but they carried on with a quiet strength. This changed how Tolstoy saw the world. He started to wonder if happiness wasn't about having more, but about needing less. The farmers taught him a big lesson. You don't need to understand everything to feel okay. Their simple way of living gave him hope. Maybe he could find that peace too, not in books or big ideas, but in the everyday moments. Tolstoy's discovery shows us that sometimes the people with the least can teach us the most.